All right, everyone, Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified Livestream. All right, so we got a couple of cool things we're going to jump into here today, and we've also got a special guest, Mr. Adam Bird. We'll be talking about some stuff with podcasts with him, and he's a bit of an expert, runs a large podcast network with some great hosts on there. First thing we're going to jump into here today, though, is a topic that I see a lot of people get wrong, and this is essentially that situational awareness is critical to avoid destroying your brand. And what we're talking about here is knowing what to say and when to say it and what not to say, and identifying threats before you walk into them. There's a lot of little details where things can go wrong really quickly and they can have a tremendous impact. So I'm going to pull up a video here that I stumbled across recently. I've seen this thing a few times, cracks me up every damn time that I see it. But this is a case of not having situational awareness. And this young lady almost stepped in it essentially did step in it in a huge way. They were reading some comments on their live stream. And I'll play the video and you guys can watch her reaction when she realizes what it was that she just said.
Happy birthday to Nick Gurr, if you're watching. Someone in chat wants me to say that.
Happy birthday!
Nick Gurr.
All right, we do have also honorable mentions.
Yes.
The look of absolute horror on her face. I can see Adam laughing in the background here in the green room. The look of absolute horror on her face when she realized what she's sitting here repeating. But this is a case of, situational awareness as it pertains to, everything that's going on. And this is really easy to kind of mess up because you're trying to do a lot of things at once. Maybe you're trying to look at screens, or you're on stage and you're talking and maybe you misspeak, or there's any number of ways that things can go wrong. Great example of this was a client that we ended up helping out because they kind of stepped in it themselves with an interview with the journalist. Now, they had some franchisees who were less than pleased with how the franchisor was running the company and started having some grumbling, started having some complaints. And this journalist was interviewing at the time, the CEO of the company. And it seemed to be a fairly benign conversation. Things seemed to be going okay. Everything seemed pretty straightforward. But he slipped up and said some things in trying to kind of build rapport with the journalist that made it seem like he was agreeing with what the journalist was saying. He was not, obviously, but the way that he said it, it now gave the journalist carte blanche to basically say, that basically, yes, the CEO said that these franchisees are right and the company did all these wrong things. And it ended up triggering a class action lawsuit. Eventually that was thwarted and the company ended up thriving in the long run, but it was a brutal path leading up to that. They ended up having a ton of negative publicity. They lost a lot of revenue. They had dwindled from several million down to about 350K in annual revenue. And the first 3 pages of Google were filled with negative publicity about the company, which made it damn near impossible to sell franchisees, right? Sell new franchise locations, but also it made it damn near impossible for them to generate revenue because somebody would go out, they would meet with a potential client, and then that client would get online and go look them up, and they'd find all this negative information. So it's really easy for things to go wrong very quickly if you don't have this situational awareness on point. Now, this is something we were always really focused on in the military because there's so many things going on in every different direction. You've got things blowing up all over the place and bullets flying in every direction and people moving all over the place. So things get chaotic really quickly. So in the military, we made a habit of really training in that environment, getting used to developing strong situational awareness. The same applies to public relations. So the key is preparation, right? We want to make sure that we know what we're going to say. And that doesn't mean that you're going to script everything out, but it means you know the direction your conversation is going to go, whether it's a podcast, whether it's an interview with a journalist, it's a stage presentation, could be anything. Could even just be interactions with, clients, potential clients, anything. You have to know exactly what direction things are going to go. And you want to have that kind of in the form of a loose plan. And then what happens is when you have that plan, it allows you to adapt more quickly because you already know where you're going. And now it's just a simple matter of course correcting here and there. So the key here is knowing your talking points. So whatever it is that you're engaged in at that point, you've got certain key messages that you want to get out. So you have to know what those are, and you can't rely on notes. You have to be able to kind of have them off the top of your head. You have these key points. And then from there, because it's what you do all day, every day, you should be able to get into the details kind of off the cuff. You don't have to necessarily have a script, but if you know the direction you're going, you're in a strong position. Now, if we're in an interview and they're asking you questions, you want to address the legitimate topics. So if they're asking you something about something that you have done or something that you're going to do or something that you said, anything like that, you address those topics. But if they're bringing up things that are not relevant, maybe they make some accusation that has no bearing on the situation, you can redirect away from those. You have no obligation to answer them, but you don't want to do the old classic, no comment, because that's not going to help you. You want to say something like, like let's say they accused you of, I don't know, being a racist, right? Like let's say that the topic initially is you did something shady in a business deal is the accusation. And then they say, oh, well, I heard that you're a racist. You would say something like, that's completely unfounded. I'm not going to dignify that with a response, but I am here to talk about the allegations about this particular business deal, and then get back on topic. Now, everything that you're saying in this situation, you have to be precise. If you start saying things that you're using generalities and you're vague, then that leaves things open to interpretation, and it gives a journalist or a disgruntled customer or just some angry troll online, it gives them something to work with because it's ambiguous. So you want to be precise with everything that you're talking about. And we also want to make sure that we're prepared for gotcha questions. Now, for a lot of us, you're not going to run into gotcha questions. If you're in politics, 100% be prepared for that. That's absolutely going to come. They're going to bring those up at every opportunity possible. And one of the ways they like to do that is they'll look at things that you have said in the past or previous social media tweets or things like that. And they'll then use those as a way to show that, well, you thought this before, or you said this before, and now you're saying this, right? So you have to be aware of those. One of the things I like to do when I'm working with a client is I will go back through their old social media posts, and you can generally search. X has great capabilities for this. Facebook is pretty good. Instagram less so, but there's a lot of ways that you can search through your old social media posts. It's a lot harder for things like podcasts or something like that, or videos on YouTube. Old articles are another one that's easy to search. What you want to do is look at things that you've said in the past and look for areas where you now have a different position or you're saying something different than you've said before. And that's where you need to be prepared for some of these gotcha questions. And then you have to make sure that you're centered before the interview. So if you've never been on TV before, you probably don't know how that process works. I like to take a similar approach whenever anybody's being interviewed for anything. So in TV, you've got the studio, which is what you guys see on the screen. But prior to that, they'll put them in what they call the green room. And that's a room where they can just kind of go and chill out. It's nice. It's relaxing. It's got, comfy couches or chairs. And you could just kind of zen out a little bit before the interview. And it's like kind of a separation from between the real world and the studio. And so I like to take that same approach prior to an interview. So turn off your phone, turn off your ringers, turn off all your notifications, just completely zen out, have some quiet time and reflect. So, think about some of the cool things that you've done. There's a concept from a book called Can't Hurt Me by a Navy SEAL named David Goggins. And this is called the cookie jar. And it's basically some of your wins, some of your big achievements, the things that you've overcome. Go back and reflect on those. Use that to kind of build your confidence and, create a sense of calm. It's like you've done this before, maybe not this exact thing, but you've overcome major things. You've accomplished major things. And so go back and refer to that and use that as an opportunity to kind of remind yourself how awesome you are. You also want to review your talking points. So make sure that you know your talking points cold, that you can just bring these up at any point in time off the top of your head. And then, of course, because the topic is whatever you do all day, every day, you should be able to expand on any of those topics without too much trouble. And then there's a really important part of this that I like to remember, and that is to assume the best, but always prepare for the worst. So don't go into an interview assuming that they're going to try to rake you over the coals, but never go into an interview thinking that that's never going to happen. So there was a case not too long ago where we were helping a client with a PR crisis. And this was in the real estate space, and some things had happened. Some of them were this client's fault. Some of them were completely out of his control. There were some things that went wrong on the administrative side, led to some water being cut off, led to some power being cut off. But there was also some things that were out of his control, like weather. In this case, there was a big freeze in Texas, and it broke several pipes in this community that this guy owns. Well, that happens. That's not something he can control. He doesn't control the weather. But of course, they use that to pile on. And so something kind of started in a Facebook group. Somebody was complaining about it, and then other people piled on, and it grew into this big, noisy public situation. And several of the people in the group had recommended that other people contact the media, which unfortunately they did. And two separate media outlets just started attacking the hell out of him. The first one, the journalist approached him, and she was pretty straightforward. She made it very clear that she thought he was a terrible person. There was no ambiguity there. The second one reached out to him and was basically playing, buddy buddy. And, I know this other journalist. She's going to do this terrible story on you. I just want to get with you and hear your side of the story and help you share, what you think happened and how this went down, and, tell your side to show that you're not really a bad guy. In reality, that was all bullshit. He ended up publishing a far worse article than the other lady did. One lady was TV, the other guy was digital. But the guy who was playing super nice to him was actually the one who came at him harder than the other one and just tore him apart in every possible way. So we want to assume the best, because that's going to put us in the right frame of mind. It's going to have us, kind of in a good place mentally. But you just have to be prepared, because things could go sideways, things could become hostile. And if you're not ready for that, you're more likely to react in a way that's going to hurt your brand. So one of the things we need to remember in this is do not allow yourself to get rushed. So if they start trying to, throw questions at you rapid fire, don't fall into that trap. Take a minute, sit back and think before you respond. And when you do that, it puts you in a lot stronger place, because it's giving you a chance to kind of take that momentum back away from them and put it back in your hands so that you can respond in a calm and rational manner. And this is really important so that you don't overreact or react in a way that's emotionally driven. And that's critical to leveraging that situational awareness, right? You have to be aware of what they're asking, how their tone is, what direction they seem to be going, but also be aware of your own feelings, your own emotions, and your own reactions. And that's something that's critical to protect your brand. Okay, so next, we're going to talk about momentum as a force multiplier to maximize your PR efforts. So there's a little story here where we had a client a while back creating great results. They had gone from fairly low in terms of authority, right? They were relatively new to the industry. Nobody knew who they were. And we basically turned them into somebody major in that industry, to a recognized authority in that industry. And things were going really well. You know, they were getting tons of search traffic. They were getting tons of opportunities coming to them, people wanting to partner with them, joint venture, people wanting to do business with them. Just everything was firing on all cylinders. And that went on for a while. And then they got to a point where they were like, well, look, like everything's really going well. And, you know, we don't really feel like we have to do this as much. So we're going to go ahead and take a break for a little while. Didn't go so well for them. Basically, what happened was, at first, everything seemed like business as usual. But shortly after that, business started dropping off. And not too long after that, a lot of their other marketing started to fall apart. So their ads started to become less effective. They were converting less. They started getting fewer links to their website. They started getting fewer opportunities, right? They used to be able to have the opportunity to write on other websites, which then would also link back to their site. Speaking opportunities, inbound clients, partnerships, even board positions. And all of that started to drift away. So what happened here was they treated it like a thing that you do, right? Like forming your company or naming your company, or, you know, the one-time things that you do. And the reality is that public relations, and really any aspect of marketing, is a constant, ongoing, and evolving thing. Just like exercise, right? You can't go to the gym once, or you can't even go to the gym and build a great body and then expect it to just stay there. You can't just be like, well, I built a great body. I've got a six-pack. I can bench, 300 pounds. I'm going to go ahead and take a break. I don't need to really work out anymore. I'll take a look at it maybe next year or in a few years and see if I need to still do it. That doesn't work anywhere. So momentum creates social proof. And what happens here is, let's say you see somebody and they're showing up everywhere. They're all over social media. They're on stages at the events that you go to. They're in the media all the time. They're, landing great opportunities, partnering with people, doing big things. And then all of a sudden, that drops off. And they're not doing all these things. They're not being featured. They're not being cited as the expert. The way that the human mind works is, we're going to look at that and say, well, what happened? Like, why did this person drop off? What does everybody else know that I don't know? Why are they not inviting this person to speak on stage? Why are they not seeking his opinion for that TV segment or that article like they used to? And that creates this kind of a fear, like, is there something wrong with this person that I don't know about? And now that makes people kind of want to pull back. And so the lack of momentum, the fact that you're not out there continuing to do the big things that you're doing, continuing to be featured, continuing to be seen as the expert, that makes you drop off pretty quickly. And it's a lot harder to get that momentum going again. So it's critical that whatever we're doing, when we're out here, we're leveraging publicity, we're getting featured in the media, we're on TV, we're on stage, we're in articles, we need to not only continue doing that, but then also continue using that publicity in all of our marketing, right? We want to be leveraging it in social media, leveraging it in our email marketing, in our ads, and all of that. And that creates that momentum that shows people, hey, not only was this person an expert at one time, but they keep being asked to come back. They keep being asked for their opinion. They keep being asked to be a part of things. And what that does is it shows not only are you an expert, but also that you're continuing to evolve. You're continuing to get better. And that makes other people want to align with you. When you don't do that, then people start to doubt you. They start to question you, and opportunities start to fall off. And it's really hard to get back into that. And it's really hard to build back up to that level. And frankly, most people never do. Once most people fall off, they take that break, they never come back. So we want to maintain that momentum, because that's critical when it comes to PR and when it comes to your brand as a whole, across the board. All right, Next up, we're going to talk about why you need a podcast to be seen as an authority in your industry. So I'm going to share some information with you guys here, but then I'm also going to be pulling up our friend, Mr. Adam Bird, to talk about some of this stuff as well. He's a guy I've known for years. He's got tremendous insight into podcasting in general. He runs a great podcast network called Heroes Media Group. And he's going to have a lot of insight on the technical side, strategic side, all of that sort of stuff. So I'm going to be talking about it a little bit from a PR perspective. And then Adam's going to join us to talk about some of the behind the scenes, the nuts and bolts, the strategy behind it. And he's the wizard behind the scenes for a lot of the biggest, most successful podcasts that a lot of you probably already listen to. So the first thing I want to touch on is, authority status comes from two things. We talked about this in a lot of different segments. It comes from exposure and it comes from trust. Now, a podcast will help you to build both. So I came across an interesting stat recently that 73% of Americans aged 12 and older have consumed a podcast in either audio or video format. And that's about 210 million people. So this creates massive reach. You can see, you can watch or listen to podcasts through, the native apps or through the platforms, right? You've got the apps on your phone like iTunes, you've got Stitcher, things like that. But you've also got the website itself for the podcasts, and the platforms as well. Like Heroes Media Group is one of them. You've got Webmaster Radio is one from Brandy Shapiro. You've also got your own website. So if you've got a website and you've got a podcast, you absolutely should have that podcast on your website so that people can go to your website and play those episodes there. You can also put it up on YouTube and take short clips and put it up on social media. So there's so many ways that you can take and leverage this media and get out here and reach more people. And the cool thing about podcasts, one of the parts that I love the most about this is that it really allows you to demonstrate your expertise. So, if you're on a TV segment, you've typically got 3 to 5 minutes to talk about whatever it is you're talking about. If you're interviewed in an article, best case scenario, you're generally going to have, a few sentences in there, right? They're going to quote you and they're going to share your thoughts in that article, but you're probably not going to have much more than a few sentences. With a podcast, though, you have the ability to sit there and talk about a topic in depth. You get to really get into the nuts and bolts, get into the minute detail, and that demonstrates your depth of expertise. Because anybody can talk about something on the surface, but it takes a true expert to really get into the weeds on it and explain things that other people don't know about. It also gives you an opportunity to kind of show your personality. And that's a huge thing because people are going to connect with you based on whether you resonate with them or not. And if your podcast is good, if you've got the ability to communicate clearly and you've got great material that people are interested in, you've essentially got a captive audience. So a lot of people will listen to podcasts while they're driving or while they're working out or, while they're working. They're not going to sit there and keep shuffling around like if they're listening to Pandora, right? It's not a music thing. They're listening because they want to consume that content, because they want to learn something from it. And they're listening to your podcast, hopefully because it's engaging, right? You have a good communication style. You are engaging, whether you're, maybe you're funny or maybe you explain something in a very clear way that people outside your industry can understand. If you can do that, if you can deliver something that people actually want, then they're likely to sit down and listen to that entire podcast. And, a podcast is typically going to be something like 30 to 45, maybe 60 minutes. That's a really good opportunity to strengthen your brand because you get to talk to people and it almost kind of feels like it's a one-on-one conversation. You get to sit here and talk and share your expertise. And in doing so, you're building your brand, you're building that trust, you're building your authority, and you're demonstrating your expertise. Now, there's a cool thing that Google put in place recently as well, and that is this little podcast thing here I'm going to pull up. So if somebody searches for, in this case, I did a quick search for real estate podcasts. What happened here was Google has this little special section in the search results that shows all of these podcasts in that particular niche. So this is a really cool way to kind of demonstrate your expertise, because if you've got a podcast that shows up there, let's say a journalist is looking for an expert to cite, that's a good chance that they're going to see you as an expert and potentially reach out to you to feature you in an article or a TV segment that they're working on. So this is awesome. And it also creates an opportunity for you to connect with people that you couldn't otherwise connect with. So if you've got a podcast, obviously you don't want to do this if it's brand new, but once you have an established podcast, you can start reaching out to very high profile people and ask to interview them on your podcast. A lot of times they will say yes. Now, obviously, let's say you've got a little podcast with, maybe you get 100 downloads a month. You're probably not going to have much success getting somebody like, let's say, Mark Cuban or Carol Roth or Matt Higgins or somebody like that on a little podcast like that. But if you start building it up, you can get a lot of the leaders in your industry and you can bring them on. And that creates alignment through association. So people are going to look at your podcast and say, oh, well, hey, this major name that I already know, like, and trust was on this podcast. This must be a great podcast. And the host must be a great person. He must really know what he's doing. He must be legit. He must be a good person, like all of this. So this is a great way to also connect and build your network. So what we're going to do now here is we're going to go ahead and pull up Adam, and we're going to let Adam talk a little bit about some of the stuff that he is an expert at on the podcast side of things. So Adam, thanks for joining us today, brother.
I appreciate it, brother. How are you guys doing?
Outstanding. All right. So why don't we start off by talking about what does somebody need to know before, and for the listeners who may have tuned in a little bit later in the show, if you weren't here originally when I was talking about Adam, let me give you guys a little bit of background on him. So Adam Bird is the CEO and founder of Heroes Media Group, and they've got a large and successful podcast network with quite a few podcasts on there. And basically, they're the driving force behind making these things successful. Obviously, the hosts are doing their thing, but Adam's the wizard behind the scenes, like I said earlier. They've got the network. They're doing promotion. They're kind of helping them with strategy and things like that. So great guy, absolute expert on the topic. So that being said, Adam, what are some of the things that you think somebody needs to know before they start a podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeremy. I think, a lot of people business owners, particularly that want to get into podcasting, they automatically think, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to get 10,000 downloads and I'm going to be the next Joe Rogan or Howard Stern or whatever. And I oftentimes sit there just like, that's a great goal to have, but that's not the reality, of it. I tell people it's a part-time job. It really is, because you want to plan it out. Consistency is key in this. And people, most average podcasters, they'll do 5 to 7 podcasts and then they drop and you never hear from them again, because they find out it's too much. And they weren't really prepared. If the best thing to do is understand it's going to take time. I
want to highlight that stat that you just shared.
Yeah.
And I think 6 was the number that I've heard that that's where most podcasts drop off.
Yeah. Yep.
That's kind of insane to think about. Like, you get to that point and that's where you give up.
Yeah. It's funny. I wish I would have wrote this down. I was reading a stat this morning. It was something along the lines of podcasters now. There are less podcasters that are active now than there were in 2018. And I've seen, as we're sitting here in the last 30 minutes, there's been 3,000 podcasts that have started today, and by the end of the day 5,000 will quit. You know what I mean? So it's a constant ebb and flow of things. But the key to be successful as a podcaster or to have a podcast show is simply be consistent.
What do you think makes kind of the difference between somebody who stops at that, 5 to 7 episodes versus somebody who keeps going and builds a successful podcast?
Strategy. I like doing the lives. The lives are important, but I'm the biggest fan of pre-recording and scheduling stuff out, because there's weeks. I mean, you've known me for a while, as you mentioned. I'm constantly on the go, and I love pre-recording shows and then just setting them in the can. So when I'm on the road and I can't do an interview or a show, I've already got stuff ready to go. So I'm not missing a week. I do a weekly show. I try to do a weekly show for my Decision Hour podcast. As you know, we do the weekly wrap up on a weekly basis. So I tell podcasters, if at a minimum, do a once a week at minimum. But if you are going to be traveling and you're going to miss, take the first 2 months and set aside 2-3 hours a week and just start knocking out a bunch of content and get that stuff going so you're ahead of the game.
I like that. And you're treating it like a business as opposed to a hobby. And that's a huge factor.
Oh yeah, it's there's nothing wrong if you're doing a podcast as a hobby. If you are, us being veterans, there's a lot of us out there that like to barracks talk, if you will. Kind of have that type. There's an audience for that type of content, but for we're focused more on like small business owners and whatnot. Eventually, a lot of the shows that we work with want to monetize their show, so it's being consistent, creating content, and I tell people, if you're interviewing somebody, you're not the storyteller, you're kind of the storyteller's guide. And you want to, if you're bringing somebody on, you want to highlight what it is that they're doing, et cetera. Take them down the path that you want them to go to highlight the things that they are doing.
I love that. So you mentioned monetizing. I definitely want to dig into that in a minute. But let's, for now, talk about some of the mistakes that you see people make when it comes to podcasting.
Not being consistent. They'll do a show and they'll post it and then forget about it. It's like that set it and forget it commercial, right? If you're not telling people that you did an episode or you got a new episode out, you're constantly not on the social platforms. I'm not a big social media fan myself, but it's the necessary evil in this business. You should be on your social media platforms every other day talking about either the next episode that you're doing or the most recent episode that you did. You need to be constant and consistent with telling people what episodes are out. The other thing I want to add to that is the type of content that you're putting out on social media. Make sure that it's engaging. Instagram right now, huge. YouTube just passed Apple and Spotify, I believe, in the podcasting thing. Most people, and I think you mentioned it earlier, like the Gen Xers, like 15-second reels, 73% of them are going to go watch or listen to the full episode because they saw it on social media. So I've always said, I got a face for radio, right? So I try not to do the video. Have to.
We've all said that.
Yeah, but it's again, the video is a necessary evil. Get the video out there, and I've said this for years. Short video clips, Instagram is great right now for those short reels, and drive people to the full episode.
Yeah, and that's something that you've always been great about. I see your reels every damn place. Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, at least in my experience, I don't feel like most people do that to the scale that they should. Do you agree with that?
100%. And they're starting to do that now. I've said this for the last, I don't know, probably 5-6 years is bring people in with the video, because we're very much a society that has to see stuff. We're scrolling through, and what used to be that 30-second, let me give you my 30-second elevator pitch, is now down to about 15 seconds or less. So if I can get you on that 15 seconds or less, I'm going to drive you over to the full episode and they're going to listen to it.
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed recently is, I've got my YouTube channel, which I've kind of been half-assing for a while. Not the main focus of my efforts, but I noticed that I've been putting some of the shorter clips, the shorts up, and holy shit, the difference in traffic. I've had several in the, multi-thousand view range. So it's definitely kind of a sleeper in that regard, that most people don't realize how incredibly powerful these short clips can actually be.
Yeah, draw the people in so you can get them to the audio side of things. I still think, and this is probably an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway because I don't care. There was a statistic. It's a couple years old now, but the average drive time in the United States was 28 minutes. And that's where the majority of people would listen to a podcast to and from work, or people at home doing house chores or on the treadmill. You mentioned earlier, the average podcast length is about 30 minutes, and that's still to date. I tell people now, go as long as the show needs to go, but keep it under 60 minutes, because anytime you go longer than that, you really start to lose traffic.
Dude, you just sparked a hell of an idea, man. Let's red team this for me. And for the listeners who aren't familiar with what red team is, basically red team is, I'm going to come up with a plan. This is a military term. I'm going to come up with a plan, and Adam's going to be the one to tear that plan apart as if he were the enemy. So as you were talking through that, it occurred to me, man, I bet you could make a partnership with some local gyms to put up little posters with a QR code to your podcast, like in front of the treadmills or some shit.
Yeah.
And I bet I would love to see how that plays out, but I feel like that would drive a lot of traffic to a podcast or to a YouTube channel or something like that.
Has, especially, I won't say the gym's name specifically because I'm not working with them anymore. But there was a national gym that we did that with at a local area in Arizona for a little while, and they were a newer gym. It was a franchise gym, and the owner of the franchisee made a deal with them. So we had QR codes on all their treadmills, and they had 5 locations in and around the Phoenix area. And we did that for about 2 years, and it was it works, and okay. You can, and you take that mindset, but you can do that with any business. Mm-hmm. Go to restaurants, another big thing, and those that have find your niche, or what type of, and what does that do? It leads into the monetization side of things then as well.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I like that. All right. You got all kinds of ideas turning in my head right now, man. All right. So, and I do want to dig deeper into the monetization shortly. And also, but let's go a little bit deeper on the promotion side. So what are some of the cool things that you've done aside from the shorts, or aside from this cool QR code thing? What are some of the other things that you've done to promote the podcasts?
Live events at Modern Day Marine, or AUSA, which is the Army version of that, setting up tables, being out in the public's eye. Most would think, well, how is that promoting? Well, you're being out there and you're networking, right? I've got people that are going to NASCAR next weekend in Nashville. They're walking around with Here's Me group badges. We got Major League Baseball, any sporting events just going around. We get some of the podcast shows, they go in under the HMG umbrella, and then I tell you, hey, while you're there, network with the other media outlets that are there, brand your brand while you're there as well. So I don't think people realize that that's a big promotion thing for these podcast shows. As far as promoting shows, we've had some shows on TV, we've had shows on radio stations across the country, and stuff like that. So and then the interchanging within the network, getting on other people's shows.
I like that. Awesome. All right, so let's before we jump into monetization, let's talk. Actually, you know what? Let's do monetization first, and then we'll talk about a strategy.
All right.
I know everybody always wants to know how the hell can I make money at this and not just have it be, a big expense for me.
So this is, I'm going to say something that's probably not necessary. Again, not the most popular opinion, but I mean, you know me long enough now, Jeremy, that I tend to do that.
No sugarcoating, huh?
Every no. And here's the thing. This is my pet peeve. People that get approached for monetizing their podcast, they'll tell you, Jeremy, what are your downloads like? How many downloads do you have a month? That's all crap. And now, I've been saying this for a year, but now the rest of the industry is saying, how do you measure what a good podcast is or whatnot? Because it used to be, well, if you got 10,000 downloads, then you can ask for this amount of money or whatnot. It's all about engagements. I've seen podcast shows that get less than 5,000 downloads a month, and they're paying their mortgage. Okay, it's all about your strategy. Or they're consistent on social media. They're engaging. They're asking questions, do polls, and stuff like that. The problem is a lot of businesses, Jeremy, let's say you come to me and say, Adam, I want to advertise on HMG. What are your downloads like and whatnot? I'm going to tell you, that's a great question, but you're asking me the wrong question, Jeremy. What you should be asking me are what my engagement's like. And my engagements are 63% end over end for the last 18 months on our network. We do a live show every Friday, and that's not including the other shows that go live on our social platforms. And that doesn't include their engagements that they get on their shows. So,
nice.
We might not have 100,000 followers on, let's say Facebook, but out of the 5,300 that we have, 63% of them are actively engaging with us week over week. So what would you rather have? 100,000 followers with less than 0.001% engagement? Or would you rather have 5,300 followers with a 63% engagement?
Yeah, I kind of think that's a no-brainer in my opinion.
Yeah.
There was a guy who talked about that way back when I first started learning about podcasts, Cliff Ravenscraft. And super knowledgeable guy. And one of the things he talked about was he had a podcast. I think it was about the TV show Lost back in the day. That was, I think, his first one. And he was talking about how he doesn't even tell them what his downloads are. Like, he's got ads. He sells ads on his podcast. I mean, obviously that podcast no longer exists.
Right.
But strictly what you're talking about. It's strictly about the engagement. It's my audience listens because they like the thing. They like the topic. They like me. And it's that engagement that you're paying for. It's not just the number of downloads. So I love that approach. I've got a friend of mine that runs a podcast, and it's actually, I think, like the number 2 rated podcast. I don't know if it's just in that category or if it was iTunes overall, but he's getting something in the range of 40 to 60,000 downloads per episode within the first day, which is astronomical. And it's, in his case, it's purely pay to play. You don't go on it for free. He's not bringing anyone on without them paying a fee. And it's several $1,000s to go on there.
Yeah.
And he's kind of been, some people are a little bit unhappy with him because they're like, oh, well, I was on and I didn't get any sales. And I think that's, in my mind, from a PR perspective, I see that as the wrong way to look at it, because you now can come on here and say, I was on the number 2 rated podcast in Apple. Like, that's a huge branding play. That's a huge authority status move. What are your thoughts on that?
Let me ask you, I'm going to answer that, but let me ask you a question. What guarantees do you have in marketing?
None. Zero.
Exactly. So you get on my show and it's like, oh, I was on your show. I paid a few grand to be on your show and I didn't get any sales. That's not a me problem. That's a sales problem. Like, talk to your salespeople. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, just because you didn't get sales in the first 48 hours, or let's say the first 7 days, that doesn't mean 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 weeks down the road. That's not to say you're not going to get a sale or a bunch of sales for people that listen to that show later on because the show's on demand. People can go through that 6 months down the road. I'm getting downloads from shows that I did 4 years ago still.
Dude, I've got that podcast back when I was running my old agency as a full service firm. I've still got those up there. That was like 6-7 years ago. Haven't published a single new episode on that podcast. It's just basically sitting there because I haven't figured out what the hell I'm going to do with it yet. And that's still getting downloads. So I've seen it, man. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right. So yeah, I mean, I look at it as a branding play. It's that authority status. It's something that creates long-term impact, right? It's not just that first day or that first week or even the first month. Like that's going to live there forever. So there's value in that for a long time to come. We definitely can't look at things from a short-sighted perspective. But then there's also, let's see, they see that. Now they go and they see you on social media. Now they go and they see your website somewhere. And then they connect with you through some other channel, right? Not the podcast itself, but something else. So I like to look at marketing as kind of a holistic thing rather than this channel did this amount of dollars, because you never really know what led to the initial contact that then before they finally reached out to you.
It's funny. I did an interview. I was at the, where was it now? It was this past February. I was at, it was the Great American Outdoor Show, largest hunting and fishing expo in the world. Okay. For those that don't know, I'm an outdoorsman. I like to do that kind of thing. So I went, interviewed a veteran-owned business that was there, did a 20-minute interview with him just off the cuff as I was walking by his booth. And he says, I've done hundreds of interviews. He's like, this is the coolest one I've ever done. I thought that was great. I was like, okay, whatever. He's just trying to be nice. I posted that onto our YouTube channel. It got like 700 views in the first 24 hours. He still emails me like, hey, let's do another interview. I'd love to talk about my next product that we're coming out, et cetera, et cetera. But he's like, I got more from your 20 minutes than I've gotten from the local news channels and a half a dozen other big name podcast shows that he's been on in the hunting and fishing industry. So
I love it.
It really, you could pay a lot of money to go on to big networks and do that. And that's great. It's needed in a lot of cases. You might not get anything from it. And then you go on to like a small mom and pops kind of a show, and you may get a lot from it. The point that I'm making is if you get the opportunity to be on a show and to push out, your brand, your story, and what your purpose or what it is that you're doing, take the opportunity because you don't know when it's going to pop up again.
I agree, man. I'm very much of the mindset of I'm going to take every damn opportunity that comes my way.
Yeah.
Which definitely makes my life a bit chaotic. But I think it's well worth it. It was a couple weeks ago when you're like, hey, can you hop on in 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised to hear that because I feel like you have a gift when it comes to interviewing people. You've got a very smooth approach, but you also have the ability to kind of bring out the really important information that sometimes, somebody like me, I'm in the media all the time. I know how to communicate. Not everyone has that skill. So a really good interviewer can make all the difference in the world because they can pull that information out of that person in a way that really positions them as an expert and helps them to demonstrate their knowledge, their expertise without coming off like a douche. Yeah. And you've got a gift of really being good at that.
Well, thank you for that. I weird to hear, but I'm getting better at taking compliments. I very much appreciate that. I look at it and I kind of contribute to my many years of sales, and it's really just about establishing trust with people. And before I interview anybody, before we hit the record button, I'll tell them, hey, this is no different than like two old friends meeting up for coffee or having a beer or whatever the case is. Like you need to relax, and I want you to have fun with this because this is about you. And I said, I'm going to ask you to trust me on this journey. I'm going to take you to where you need to go, and I'm going to I will get the answers from you. So don't worry about it. Just have fun. And that's the biggest thing. I think when you set the tone before the record button goes, It establishes that trust, and I try to make it as fun as possible.
I love that, man. And I should have Chrissy grab the that particular interview and drop that into the group so that people can kind of get a sense for that. I think the one that you and I did, and you and I have done several,
Yeah.
but the one that you and I did most recently, I think was the smoothest one ever. It really flowed well. So Chrissy, if you want to grab that, either from Adam's channel or mine, I don't care. Just drop that in the group for the audience. And then, so Adam, let's talk a little bit about Heroes Media Group. Talk
Sure.
about what exactly you guys do for people who have or want to have podcasts, so they can kind of get a sense for what you bring to the table on that.
Appreciate it. So I started Heroes Media Group. This is actually my second media venture in 2015. And it's the mindset that I had when I first started this was, I'm not necessarily creating a new technology or anything like that. I'm sick and tired of how media is delivered and consumed, right? So I'm taking what's already out there, and I want to change people's mindset. We live in a negative world, so I want to change it to where people are more positive. That's how I see it, right? There's plenty of positive stories out there. So heroes, community heroes, veterans, military, firefighter, first responders, educators, and then there's a clergy piece in there as well. And we don't ask that you don't necessarily have to be one of those people to join our network. We just ask that you support one of those groups, if not all of them, to be a part of the group. What we do is we're a hosting platform. So we host, you put your show on our network, and we help blast. We help market your show for you. We're the only show, or we're the only network that will do that without having to pay an arm, a leg, and maybe your firstborn to get your name out there. We do that religiously on a weekly basis with our shows. We're also a production company. So Jeremy has a show, and he's like, hey, listen, I just want to do my show. I don't want to worry about how to put music in the background or do this or do that and the other thing. We do all post-production of podcast shows for our clients, as well as some of the clients that we have. That's one of the packages that we do. So we will help you with the post-production side of the show. So hosting, anything related to post-production, whether it's audio, video, we do transcription. And then on top of that, for all the authors out there, turn your manuscript into an audio book as well. So we kind of round everything off right there. And then, as you mentioned earlier, I sit down and I'll do one-on-ones with every show that, they come up to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about monetizing. What should I be at? What are the right questions that I should be asking people, and who should I be looking for to monetize, on our shows and stuff like that. So I'll walk people through that process as well.
Awesome. Chrissy, do me a favor and go ahead and drop Adam's URL into the group so that people can go check that out if they'd like. And you know what? Go ahead and drop a link to his Facebook and LinkedIn profiles as well for me, please. So for those of you who are listening and, you think you want to potentially start a podcast, I would definitely recommend checking out Adam, having a conversation with him. His team is great, and they've got an amazing platform for really getting your podcast out there in a big way. This is something that I think we all need to do in some capacity because of, what I talked about earlier in the interview or in the segment about the role that it plays in developing your authority status and helping you to earn more publicity and reach a larger audience. So it's something that you guys need to do one way or the other. I believe that if you're going to do it, you should absolutely work with Adam on that. He's a great guy, and they've got a great team over there. So Chrissy's going to drop that link in the Facebook group, and she'll drop the links to his social media profiles as well. So Adam, thanks for joining us today, brother. It's always great to have you on. And,
Appreciate you.
We'll have you back again soon.
Sounds good, brother. Take care. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care. All right, guys. So that's a wrap on the show. We're going to go ahead and close out with Jeremy's PR PSA. And what we've got today is that public relations is a bit like war in the sense that you're always fighting multiple enemies to win a positive public perception. What I mean by this is you're fighting against competitors. Obviously, we all know that. But you're also fighting against an evolving market, right? Things change. Technology advances. Some things go away. New things come up. the companies or the brands or the public figures that you once loved, eventually you will hate at some point. For those of you who are a little bit older like me, you may remember when like Microsoft was the most amazing company in the world and everybody loved it. And then everybody hated it. Everybody hates Microsoft. Everybody hates Bill Gates. Same thing's going on with Google right now. Google used to be the best thing since sliced bread. Now they're getting hammered, not only by the DOJ, but also in kind of the court of public opinion, right? You ask most people what they think of Google. And aside from a few people in the SEO industry, most people have a negative perception of Google because of the way that they operate, because of the things that they do. You've also got a finicky audience. So, somebody may love a brand one day, and then maybe they feel like that brand got too big or it doesn't really align with what they think anymore. And so now all of a sudden they hate that brand. All of these things happen on a regular basis. It's completely normal. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing anything wrong. And, I touched on the momentum aspect earlier, right? If you're crushing it and then you kind of take your foot off the gas, now that's one of those factors that you have to fight against. So there's all of these factors that you're battling with to first earn and then maintain a positive public perception. And, that's the way that PR works. If you want to build a brand that's going to thrive through all the chaos over a long period of time, you've got to constantly be battling all of these different factors and maintain the momentum through that. So that's a wrap for today, guys. Hope you guys found a lot of value in this. Like I said before, I definitely recommend checking out Heroes Media Group and connecting with Adam. Great guy, lots of knowledge, tremendous resources. For those of you who are not in our Facebook group, if you hit that QR code that's up in the corner, it will take you straight to the group. You can go ahead and join there. That's the free group. We've also got the Spartan Community, which is our paid group, where we go a lot deeper into a lot of step-by-step tutorials, exactly how to achieve certain things as far as public relations and marketing goes. And a lot of cool software we have on the back end that you can use in your marketing. So that's a wrap for today, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.